The morning of my 65th birthday dawned bright and clear, birds singing outside my bedroom window as if they knew it was a special day. I'd never been one for extravagant celebrations, but milestone birthdays deserve at least a little recognition, don't you think? 65, Medicare age, as my friend Darlene kept joking. I stretched, feeling that familiar ache in my lower back. Reminder that time marches on whether we acknowledge it or not. My name is Aaliyah Gray, and I've spent the better part of my life putting others first. That's what mothers do, or so I've always believed. We nurture, we sacrifice, we give until there's almost nothing left, and then we find a way to give a little more. For most of my years, I wore that sacrifice like a badge of honor. Now, I'm not so sure. I made myself a cup of coffee, French roast, my small indulgence, and checked my phone. No messages. No missed calls. Nothing for Marcus, my only son. Not that I was surprised, really. These days, his communication mostly consisted of Venmo requests and emergency phone calls when something had gone wrong. When was the last time he'd called just to ask how I was doing? I couldn't remember, and that realization sat heavy in my chest. Maybe he's planning a surprise, I told myself, though the hope felt hollow even as I said it. Marcus had never been one for surprises, at least not the kind that required planning or effort on his part. I wandered to the kitchen window, coffee mug warm between my palms, and gazed out at my garden. The roses were blooming early this year, their pink and yellow heads nodding in the gentle May breeze. James, my late husband, had planted those bushes 20 years ago. Something beautiful that comes back year after year, he'd said, like my love for you. James had been gone for 12 years now. Heart attack, sudden and devastating, but those roses kept returning, faithful as a promise. I'd made small plans for the evening. A dinner at Bellini's, that lovely Italian place downtown I've adored for years. Nothing fancy, just good food with a few close friends who still remembered what celebrations meant. I'd sent invitations 3 weeks in advance, actual paper invitations with gold lettering, not just text messages that disappear with a swipe. In an age of digital everything, there's something special about opening an envelope addressed to you, feeling the weight of the card in your hands, knowing someone took the time to choose it specifically. Everyone had RSVP'd within days. My sister Catherine was flying in from Phoenix, despite her arthritic knees that made air travel a special kind of torment. My best friends from college, Virginia and Marla, both confirmed, though they lived hours away. Even my neighbor Henry, who rarely leaves his house these days because of his hip, said he wouldn't miss it. Wouldn't miss my favorite neighbor's big day, he'd said, voice gruff with affection. Everyone had responded, except Marcus. I didn't think much of it at first. Marcus has always been forgetful about certain things. Not the big work presentation or the basketball game with his friends, mind you. Just the little things. Like his mother's birthday. Like the anniversary of his father's death. Like the Sunday dinners I'd prepared faithfully for years until the empty chair at the table became too painful to bear witness to. I had called him 2 weeks before the dinner. Left a voicemail. Just checking if you got the invitation, sweetheart. Let me know if you can make it. No response. I texted 3 days later. Hi Marcus, hoping you can join us for my birthday dinner. Should be a lovely evening. He read it. Those little blue check marks told me that much. But still, nothing. A skilled financial consultant with a corner office and clients who adored him, my son somehow couldn't find 30 seconds to respond to his mother's invitation. The irony wasn't lost on me. As I sipped my coffee, I gazed at the framed photos on my mantel. Marcus as a toddler, gap-toothed and beaming, clutching the stuffed dinosaur he refused to sleep without. Marcus at his high school graduation, lanky and proud in his blue cap and gown. Marcus with his father, my late husband James, at a baseball game, their identical smiles capturing a moment of pure joy. Those smiles, James's gentle, Marcus's exuberant, used to light up my world. James would have been so disappointed. He never forgot a birthday or anniversary, not in 32 years of marriage. Not because he had a perfect memory, he didn't, but because he made the effort. Because he understood that remembering the important moments is how we show love. James kept a small leather-bound calendar in his jacket pocket, filled with dates and notes. The big things and the little things, he'd say, they all matter when it comes to loving someone right. After he died, I found entries years in advance. My birthdays, our anniversary, even reminders to order my favorite flowers, all carefully noted. That's what love looked like to James Gray. Intentional, thoughtful, present. I spent the morning tidying up, though the house was already clean. Old habits die hard. I wiped down counters that gleamed, straightened pillows that were perfectly aligned, dusted shelves that held no trace of yesterday's existence. These small rituals had been my anchor after James died, when grief threatened to pull me under. Now they were just routine, familiar movements my hands knew by heart while my mind wandered elsewhere. By noon, there was still no word from Marcus, and that tiny flame of hope was flickering dangerously low. I forced myself to eat a light lunch, a small salad, a piece of whole grain bread, though my appetite had abandoned me hours ago. Don't be silly, I scolded myself. It's just a birthday, just another day. But the heaviness in my chest argued otherwise. I got ready for dinner with extra care, wore my favorite dress, midnight blue with silver threading that Catherine says brings out my eyes. I'd purchased it last year during a rare shopping trip with Virginia, who'd insisted I try it on despite my protests that it was too fancy, and where would I even wear such a thing? I was grateful for her persistence now. The dress fit perfectly, skimming over my curves with a gentle forgiveness that department store mirrors rarely offer. I applied my makeup carefully, taking time with the lipstick, a soft rose shade that James always liked. I fastened my pearl earrings, his gift on our 25th anniversary, and slipped my wedding band back on after moisturizing my hands. I never removed it for long. 12 years a widow, and still, that gold circle was as much a part of me as my heartbeat. You look lovely, I told my reflection, trying to believe it. At 65, the face looking back at me had its share of lines and softening contours. But James used to say those lines were proof of a life well lived. Every laugh, every worry, every moment of wonder, they're all written there, he'd say, tracing the crinkles around my eyes. The story of you. And it's my favorite story. 3 o'clock. 4 o'clock. 5 o'clock. Still nothing from Marcus. My sister Catherine picked me up at 6:15 for the 6:30 reservation. Her rental car smelled of artificial pine and the faint trace of someone else's perfume. Catherine looked good, sun-kissed from the Arizona heat, her silver hair cut in a stylish bob that framed her face perfectly. She'd always been the more fashionable sister, the one who embraced trends while I found comfort in the familiar. Is Marcus meeting us there? She asked as we pulled out of my driveway, her tone carefully neutral. But I knew my sister. I heard the judgment simmering beneath the question. I just shrugged and said I wasn't sure. I couldn't bring myself to admit that my only child, my son, hadn't even bothered to respond to my invitation, let alone call on my actual birthday. That felt too much like failure, not his, but mine. As if somewhere along the line, I'd failed to teach him the basic courtesies that our parents had instilled in us. As if his indifference was somehow a reflection of my worth. That boy. Catherine muttered, shaking her head. I swear, Aaliyah, you've always been too soft on him. James would be disappointed. I defended him, of course. Mothers always do. He's just busy, Cat. His new position at the firm is demanding. The words sounded hollow even to my ears, worn thin from repeated use. Even as I said it, I knew it was an excuse. A text message takes seconds. A phone call minutes. We all make time for what we prioritize, don't we? That thought landed like a stone in my stomach as Catherine navigated the evening traffic, her mouth set in a tight line that told me she was biting back words for my sake. Bellini's was beautiful that evening, soft lighting and the gentle murmur of conversation creating an atmosphere of warmth and welcome. The maitre d' greeted me by name. I'd been coming here for years, first with James, then with friends after he passed. "Happy birthday, Mrs. Gray," he said with a genuine smile. "Your guests are already seated in the private room." Walking into the private dining room at Bellini's and seeing the faces of people who'd made the effort to be there for me, it meant everything. Virginia had driven 3 hours from Cooperstown despite her arthritis. Marla brought a handmade card with pressed flowers from her garden. Henry had his daughter drive him over, because he wanted to celebrate with me. My cousin Edward and his wife had come all the way from Buffalo. 8 people who had rearranged their lives, if only for an evening, to celebrate mine. And there it was, the empty chair, right next to mine at the head of the table. I'd held out hope that Marcus would surprise me, show up unannounced with flowers and an apologetic smile. He didn't. The empty chair seemed to grow larger as the evening progressed, a physical manifestation of the absence I'd been feeling for years. Not just Marcus's physical absence, but the emotional vacancy that had gradually expanded between us. When had he stopped seeing me? When had I become background noise in his life, a supporting character in a story where he was the only protagonist that mattered? I pushed those thoughts aside as Catherine helped me into my seat. Tonight wasn't about what or who was missing. It was about celebrating with the people who had chosen to be present. I fixed a smile on my face, determined not to let Marcus's absence overshadow this gathering of love. We ordered appetizers, bruschetta with fresh tomatoes and basil, calamari lightly fried to perfection, and an antipasto platter that Henry eyed with particular appreciation. Bellini's had always done appetizers well. James and I used to sometimes skip entrees entirely, making a meal of their small plates and a good bottle of wine, lingering over each bite and conversation that flowed as easily as the Chianti. The waiter, a young man named Anthony with kind eyes and a gentle manner, brought a bottle of Prosecco to the table. "Compliments of the house," he said, "for the birthday celebration." He poured the sparkling wine into delicate flutes, the bubbles dancing in the soft light of the candles Catherine had insisted on lighting. Catherine gave a lovely toast. "To my sister Aaliyah, the strongest, most gracious woman I know. You've weathered storms that would have broken others, and you've done it with a dignity and resilience that continues to inspire everyone who knows you. May this year bring you all the joy and peace you so richly deserve." Everyone clinked glasses. I smiled through it all, trying not to let that empty space beside me overshadow the love that filled the rest of the room. The conversation flowed easily, years of friendship creating a comfortable rhythm of stories, laughter, and the occasional gentle debate. Virginia was sharing an anecdote about her new granddaughter's first steps when I felt my phone vibrate in my handbag. I normally never check my phone at dinner. James always insisted it was the height of rudeness, but something compelled me to look. It was a banking alert. "Your platinum card has been charged $750 at Lux nightclub." I stared at that notification, not quite believing what I was seeing. The emergency credit card. The one I'd added Marcus to years ago, during his divorce from Kendra. He'd been emotional, financially strained from the legal fees. I wanted him to have a safety net, just in case. "This is for emergencies only, Marcus," I'd told him, handing over the card. "Car repairs, medical bills, that sort of thing. Just until you get back on your feet after the divorce settlement." "Thanks, Mom," he'd replied, taking the card gratefully. "I promise I'll only use it if absolutely necessary. And I'll pay you back every cent." I remembered how vulnerable he'd looked in that moment, sitting at my kitchen table with shadowed eyes and slumped shoulders. The divorce had been his idea, But the reality of untangling a 7-year marriage had hit him harder than he'd anticipated. I wanted to ease his burden, to smooth the path just a little. That's what mothers do, isn't it? That was 3 years ago. He'd used it occasionally since then. A plane ticket when his flight was canceled, an unexpected car repair, always with a heads-up call or text. Mom, the transmission went out on the Audi. Had to use the emergency card. I'll pay back when I get my bonus next month. And he usually did, albeit sometimes with reminders from me. I excused myself from the table, murmuring something about needing to visit the ladies' room. I walked toward the restroom area, but stopped in a quiet corridor of the restaurant. I leaned against the wall, suddenly needing its support, and opened my banking app to make sure the notification wasn't a mistake. It wasn't. There was the pending charge, $750 at Lux nightclub. Not exactly an emergency, unless you count a sudden champagne shortage as a crisis. The corridor was quiet, just the distant murmur of conversation and the soft clink of silverware against plates filtering through from the main dining room. A waiter passed with a tray of desserts, nodding politely as he continued on his way. The normalcy of the moment stood in stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. Lux is that exclusive new club downtown where celebrities go when they're in town. The kind of place where they serve champagne with sparklers attached to the bottles and charge hundreds of dollars for the privilege. I'd read about it in the local paper, seen photos of the sleek interior and beautiful people who frequented it. It wasn't just expensive, it was ostentatious, designed for people who wanted to be seen spending money. Marcus couldn't call me on my birthday, but he could use my credit card to impress his friends or a date. In that moment, I felt something inside me just break. Not like a violent snap, but like ice cracking on a spring lake. Quiet, but irreversible. All those years of excuses I'd made for him, all the times I'd told myself he was just busy or forgetful or stressed, they caught up to me at once. The weight of 1,000 small disappointments, a million tiny heartbreaks, countless moments when I'd swallowed my hurt rather than make a fuss. I've never been impulsive. I'm the woman who makes pro and con lists before buying a new coffee maker, who researches vacation destinations for months before booking, who waited until the third date to let James kiss me goodnight. My friends have always teased me about my cautious nature, my need to consider all angles before making a decision. Aaliyah doesn't leap before she looks, Virginia used to joke. She studies the distance, calculates the trajectory, consults 3 experts, and then decides if the leap is worth considering further. But in that moment, standing in the hallway of Bellini's on my 65th birthday, I didn't hesitate. My finger hovered over the freeze card button in my banking app for just a second. Long enough for doubt to whisper its familiar caution in my ear. What if he really needs it? What if this is a misunderstanding? What if he's entertaining clients, and it's actually work-related? Then I remembered the unanswered invitation, the unacknowledged birthday, the empty chair at my table while my card was being swiped at Lux nightclub. I pressed the button. The confirmation screen appeared. Your platinum card has been temporarily frozen. All future charges will be declined until you unfreeze the card. A strange calm settled over me. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just peace. As if I'd finally set down a heavy burden I'd been carrying for too long. I put my phone back in my purse, checked my lipstick in the hallway mirror, and returned to my birthday dinner with a genuine smile for the first time that evening. Everything all right? Catherine asked as I slid back into my seat. Yes, I replied, picking up my Prosecco. Everything is exactly as it should be. And for the first time in years, I meant it. For the next hour, I was fully present with the people who had chosen to be present with me. We shared stories about travels we'd taken, and those still on our bucket lists. Virginia described the northern lights she'd seen in Iceland last year, her hands painting pictures in the air as she struggled to capture their ethereal beauty. Marla talked about the cooking class she'd taken in Tuscany, where she'd learned to make pasta from an 80-year-old woman who spoke no English but communicated perfectly through the language of food. Henry, usually so quiet, surprised everyone with tales of his youth in New Orleans, where he'd played saxophone in clubs that didn't check IDs too carefully. We reminisced about old times, college adventures, and career mishaps, first apartments, and fashion disasters. Catherine reminded everyone about my brief flirtation with purple hair in 1975, producing a photo from her wallet that I'd spent decades trying to eradicate from existence. We laughed until our sides hurt, the kind of deep, healing laughter that cleanses the soul. We made plans for a girls' trip to Savannah in the fall, Catherine, Virginia, Marla, and me. "We'll drink mint juleps on a veranda," Virginia declared, her New York accent making the Southern traditions sound hilariously exotic, "and scandalize the locals with our Northern ways." No one mentioned the empty chair again, and I didn't give it, or Marcus, another thought. Well, almost. The chef, Paolo, came out to greet us personally. He'd known James and me for years, had catered our 25th anniversary party at a discounted rate for my favorite customers. Now, he clasped my hands in his, kissing both cheeks in the Italian way. "Signora Gray, you do not age. You only become more beautiful, like fine wine." His compliment was extravagant, his warmth genuine. He returned to the kitchen, only to emerge minutes later with a divine chocolate soufflé for the table to share, on the house. It was just being served, warm and perfect, when my phone started vibrating. Not just once, but continuously. Call after call. Text after text. I glanced at my handbag, where the screen of my phone was lighting up repeatedly, visible through the open clasp. Catherine raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. She knew, somehow. Sisters often do. I excused myself again and stepped outside to the restaurant's terrace. The spring evening was mild, stars just beginning to appear overhead in a sky still tinged with the last whispers of sunset. The terrace was empty, strings of small white lights creating a gentle glow that softened the edges of reality. I took a deep breath, savoring the scent of jasmine from the potted plants that lined the perimeter, and answered. "Hello, Mom. Thank God you picked up. There's something wrong with the card. It's not working." Marcus's voice was agitated, the background noise of a club evident. Thumping music, laughter, the cacophony of voices trying to be heard over the din. "What card, Marcus?" I asked calmly, so calmly that for a moment I didn't recognize my own voice. It was steady, measured, almost cool. None of the hurt or anger I was feeling colored the words. "The emergency card. I'm at Lux with some colleagues and clients, and the card just got declined for the second bottle service. It's humiliating. My boss is here." I leaned against the stone balustrade, cool beneath my palm. So, it was work-related. A business expense, not a personal indulgence. Did that make it better? I considered this for a moment, but the calm certainty I'd felt in the hallway didn't waver. "I see. And is this an emergency, Marcus?" "What?" "No, I mean, kind of. It's embarrassing. Can you check what's wrong with it?" "Nothing's wrong with it." I froze it. There was a beat of silence on the phone. Complete silence, as if Marcus had stepped away from the noise of the club. I could almost see him, brow furrowed in confusion, struggling to process what I'd just said. "You what? Why would you do that?" "I'm at Bellini's right now, Marcus. At my birthday dinner. The one I invited you to 3 weeks ago. The one you never RSVP'd to. Today is my 65th birthday, in case you've forgotten." Another beat of silence. Longer this time. I waited, giving him space to absorb the information, giving myself time to breathe through the hurt that was threatening to close my throat. "Mom, come on. I've been swamped at work. We're trying to land this new client and—"
"No, Marcus."
"No more excuses," I interrupted, my voice finally betraying emotion. Not anger, not resentment, but a deep sadness that seemed to echo across the years of disappointments, large and small. You couldn't take 10 seconds to text your mother, "Happy birthday," but you could use my credit card for $750 worth of champagne? That card is for emergencies. Is impressing your boss an emergency? Is it more important than acknowledging the woman who gave birth to you? I hadn't intended to say so much. Had planned to keep my dignity intact, to maintain the calm I'd felt in the corridor. But now that the dam had broken, words poured out, years of unspoken hurt finding voice at last. This isn't fair. I was going to call you later. I've been more than fair, Marcus. For years. My voice was softer now, but no less intense. Your father would be so disappointed in the man you've become. Not because you're not successful. You are, and we're both proud of that. But because somewhere along the way, you forgot the values we raised you with. Consideration, gratitude, basic human decency. I hadn't planned to invoke James's memory. Had never used it as a weapon in all the years since his death. But the truth of those words resonated within me, impossible to deny. James would indeed be disappointed. Not in Marcus's achievements or career, but in the kind of man, the kind of son he had become. Mom, I didn't realize. That's the problem, Marcus. You didn't realize. You didn't think. Because I'm just your mother, always there, always understanding, always making excuses for you. Not tonight. Not anymore. I gazed up at the emerging stars, finding comfort in their eternal presence. They had witnessed so much human drama throughout the centuries, loves and losses, joys and sorrows, beginnings and endings. My small mother-son conflict was nothing in the grand scheme of the universe. And yet, to me, it felt momentous. A turning point. I'm going back inside now to finish celebrating with the people who remembered my birthday. People who made me a priority. Something you should think about. Mom, please. I need the card. I can't cover this bill on my own. I paused, considering. The mother in me, the one who had always rushed to fix, to heal, to make things easier, wanted to relent. To unfreeze the card, to spare him the embarrassment, to shoulder the burden as I'd always done. But the woman in me, the one who had been silently hurting for too long, held firm. Then perhaps this will be a valuable lesson in living within your means. Good night, Marcus. I ended the call and took a moment, looking up at the stars, before straightening my shoulders and turning to go back inside. As I reached for the door handle, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the glass, straight-backed, chin high, eyes clear. For the first time in years, I looked like myself. Not just Marcus's mother or James's widow, but Aaliyah Gray, a woman who had finally found her voice. I returned to the table just as Anthony was serving the chocolate souffle. Perfect timing, Mrs. Gray, he said with a warm smile. Chef says it's best enjoyed immediately. I slid into my seat, accepting the small plate Catherine passed to me. The souffle was a work of art, rich dark chocolate with a molten center that released its decadent aroma as I broke the surface with my spoon. It was possibly the best dessert I've ever tasted. Or maybe it just tasted like justice. Everything okay? Virginia asked, her perceptive eyes noticing something different in my demeanor. Better than okay, I replied, savoring another bite of souffle. Everything is exactly as it should be. My phone kept buzzing in my purse. 3 more calls from Marcus, several text messages lighting up the screen. I turned it to silent and put it away. This was my night, with people who valued me enough to be present. For once, Marcus would have to wait. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of laughter, stories, and genuine connection. We lingered over coffee and additional desserts that Paolo insisted we try. Tiramisu light as air, cannoli with shells so crisp they shattered at first bite, panna cotta topped with fresh berries. It was nearly 10 when we finally prepared to leave, full of good food and the warm glow of friendship. "Thank you all for coming," I said as we gathered in the restaurant foyer. "For making the effort. For making me feel seen." My voice caught on the last word, and Catherine squeezed my hand in understanding. "Wouldn't have missed it," Henry said gruffly, leaning on his cane. "Best birthday party I've been to in years. Though I may need to be rolled home after all that food." His daughter laughed, taking his arm. "Worth every calorie, Dad." Virginia and Marla hugged me tightly, making me promise to call soon about the Savannah plans. "We're not getting any younger," Virginia said pragmatically. "No more putting off the things that bring us joy." Catherine dropped me off around 10:30. It had been a wonderful evening, despite, or perhaps because of, that confrontation with Marcus. For the first time in years, I'd stood up for myself instead of making excuses for him. It felt liberating. "You did the right thing," Catherine said as we pulled into my driveway. "With Marcus, I mean." At my surprised look, she shrugged. "I could tell from your face when you came back to the table. You had that look, the one Mom used to get when she'd finally had enough of Dad's nonsense." I smiled at the memory. Our mother had been a gentle soul, but when pushed too far, she had a backbone of steel. "I didn't think I had it in me," I admitted. "You've always had it in you, Aaliyah. You just forgot for a while." She leaned over to hug me. "Happy birthday, sis. I'm proud of you." I entered my quiet house, turning on lights as I moved through familiar rooms. The emptiness felt different tonight. Peaceful rather than lonely. I kicked off my shoes, relieved to free my feet after hours in heels, and padded to the kitchen for a glass of water. Only then did I finally check my phone. 7 missed calls. 12 text messages, increasingly desperate. "Mom, please answer. Mom, this is serious. I had to borrow money from my boss. This is humiliating. Please unfreeze the card. I'm sorry about your birthday. Mom, please call me back." Part of me, the lifelong mother part, wanted to call him immediately, unfreeze the card, make everything better. That's what mothers do, isn't it? We fix things. We comfort. We forgive, sometimes too easily. We sacrifice our own needs, our own dignity, to spare our children pain, even when that pain is a natural consequence of their own actions, even when that pain might actually help them grow. But another part of me, the part that had finally awakened at the restaurant, knew this moment was crucial. The dynamic between us had been broken for years. Continuing the same pattern would change nothing. Marcus would apologize profusely tonight, perhaps send flowers tomorrow, and by next week, we'd be right back where we started, with him taking my presence, my support, my love for granted. With me making excuses for his behavior, both to others and to myself. I set the phone down on the kitchen counter and moved to the living room, where I carefully removed my pearl earrings and placed them in their velvet box. I unzipped my dress, hanging it properly to prevent wrinkles. I wiped away the day's makeup, applied night cream to skin that showed every year of my 65 trips around the sun. These small rituals grounded me, reminded me of who I was beneath the roles I'd played for so long. Daughter, wife, mother, widow. Each identity had shaped me, but none of them fully defined me. At my core, I was still Aaliyah Gray, the woman who had once dreamed of traveling the world, who had studied art history in college, who had fallen in love with James over a discussion of Caravaggio's use of light and shadow. So, I did something I'd never done before. I let him sit with his discomfort. I took off my makeup, changed into my nightgown, said my prayers, and went to bed. Without resolving his crisis. Without soothing his wounded ego. Without making it all better. It wasn't easy. Every maternal instinct urged me to pick up the phone, to rescue him as I'd done countless times before. But I resisted, knowing that sometimes the greatest act of love is allowing someone to face the consequences of their own choices. I slept surprisingly well. When I woke up the next morning, sunlight streaming through the curtains I'd forgotten to close, there was a voicemail from Marcus, time-stamped 2:17 a.m. I sat on the edge of my bed, steeling myself before pressing play. Would it be angry? Defensive? Would he lash out, blame me for his embarrassment? I took a deep breath and listened. Mom, I don't even know what to say. I'm sitting in my car in the parking garage, and I'm so ashamed. I completely forgot your birthday. Not just forgot to call, but didn't even remember it was happening. And then I used your card without even thinking about it. I've been taking you for granted for so long, and I didn't even realize I was doing it. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I wouldn't. But I need you to know I'm sorry. Really sorry. Not just about the card or the money. About everything. About who I've become. I love you, Mom. I'll call tomorrow. Or I'll come by. Whatever you want. I'm sorry. His voice broke on the last word, and then the message ended. I sat motionless, the phone still pressed to my ear, tears welling up unexpectedly. In all the scenarios I'd imagined while falling asleep, this wasn't one of them. I expected anger, continued defensiveness, maybe even emotional manipulation. How could you embarrass me like that? I didn't expect genuine remorse. I didn't expect him to see the bigger picture so quickly. I walked to the kitchen in my bathrobe, made coffee on autopilot, and stood at the window watching the morning light play on my roses. James's roses. They'd be in full bloom soon, a riot of color and fragrance that always made me think of him. After my second cup of coffee, I opened my banking app and unfroze the card. Not because I felt guilty, I didn't. Not because I wanted to rescue him. That time had passed. But because the lesson had been learned, and continuing the punishment served no purpose. The charge from Lux had already gone through before I froze the card, I noticed. $750 for a night of revelry while I celebrated my birthday with others. The amount no longer angered me. It just saddened me that our relationship had deteriorated to this point. I showered and dressed in comfortable clothes, soft jeans and a blue cotton sweater. Applied minimal makeup, just enough to feel put together. Then I sent him a text. I'll be home all day. 3 simple words. An invitation, not a demand. A door opened, but one he would have to choose to walk through. I didn't apologize for freezing the card. Didn't minimize the hurt I'd expressed. Didn't rush to make everything okay. Just let him know I was here, ready to talk when he was ready to listen. Then I went about my day. Watered the garden. Started a load of laundry. Called Catherine to thank her again for coming. Began reading the novel Virginia had given me as a birthday gift. I didn't wait by the phone or check for messages every few minutes. I simply lived my life, trusting that what needed to happen would happen in its own time. As I folded warm towels from the dryer, smoothing each one with practiced hands, I realized something had shifted within me. The heaviness I'd carried for so long, the weight of unmet expectations, of one-sided effort, of love that seemed to flow only outward, had lightened. Not disappeared entirely, but transformed into something more manageable. Something that no longer threatened to pull me under with each new disappointment. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I felt like I could breathe fully. Like I was standing on solid ground instead of constantly shifting sand. And all it had taken was the courage to say enough. To draw a line, not in anger, but in love. Love for my son, yes, but also, finally, love for myself. The doorbell rang just after noon. I didn't rush. Old habits die hard, but they do die eventually. I finished cutting the roses I wanted from my garden, gathered them in my basket, and took my time walking through the house. With each step, I reminded myself to stay centered in this new strength I'd found. Not to slip back into old patterns of immediate forgiveness, without accountability, to value myself enough to expect better. When I opened the door, the sight of Marcus nearly made me falter. He looked terrible, eyes red-rimmed and shadowed, hair uncombed, stubble darkening his jaw. He stood on my porch holding a large bouquet of lilies, my favorite flowers, a gift bag, and what appeared to be a bakery box. He looked like he hadn't slept well, like he'd spent the night wrestling with demons of his own making. "Hi, Mom," he said, hesitant, almost shy. So different from his usual confident demeanor. "Hello, Marcus," I replied simply, stepping aside to let him in but not embracing him as I normally would. The lack of physical contact felt strange, almost uncomfortable, but necessary. This wasn't a moment for easy affection that would paper over deeper issues. The change was immediately apparent. Usually, Marcus would breeze in, talking a mile a minute about work or sports or whatever was occupying his mind. He'd give me a quick peck on the cheek, set down whatever he'd brought, and make himself at home, raiding the refrigerator or turning on the TV to check scores. That performative intimacy that actually created distance, preventing real connection. That day, he moved cautiously, like he wasn't sure of his welcome anymore. Like he was a guest in a place that had once been a second home. The living room seemed to shrink with his presence, the air between us charged with unspoken words. "These are for you," he said, offering the flowers. They were gorgeous. White and pink stargazer lilies, their fragrance already filling the room. "And this," he indicated the bakery box. "It's a chocolate soufflé cake from Bellini's. I had to special order it this morning. And this." He handed me the gift bag. "It's just something small." I accepted the flowers, their weight in my hands substantial. Meaningful. "Thank you. They're beautiful." I didn't rush to open the gift, didn't immediately excuse his behavior with gratitude for these peace offerings. Instead, I simply asked, "Would you like some coffee?" Relief flickered across his face at this small normalcy. "Yes, please." We moved to the kitchen, that heart of the home where so many important conversations had taken place over the years. James and I deciding to adopt Marcus after years of infertility. Telling 10-year-old Marcus that his grandfather had passed away. Marcus announcing he'd been accepted to college. All those milestone moments, marked by coffee or hot chocolate and the comfort of familiar surroundings. I arranged the lilies in a crystal vase, James's mother's, one of the few family heirlooms we possessed, while Marcus sat at the kitchen island, watching me. The normal easy banter was absent. No jokes about my precise flower arranging. No updates on his latest client victory. Just silence, heavy with anticipation. "Black, 2 sugars. Still your preference?" I asked, setting a mug in front of him. A small reminder that despite everything, I did know him, did pay attention to the details of his life when given the chance. "Yes," he replied, surprised I remembered. "Always has been." I joined him at the island, both holding our coffee mugs like shields. Or perhaps like offerings, small tokens of potential peace in the battlefield of wounded feelings and missed connections. "I don't know where to start, Mom," Marcus said after a long pause, staring into his coffee as if it might contain the words he needed. "The beginning is usually best." Marcus took a deep breath, his shoulders rising and falling with the effort. "I've been selfish, thoughtless, taking you for granted in ways I didn't even realize until last night. When that card got declined the second time, and I was standing there with Travis, my boss, and these clients were trying to land, I was so focused on how embarrassing it was for me, how it might make me look unprofessional or financially irresponsible." He looked down at his coffee, ashamed. "It wasn't until you mentioned your birthday that it hit me. Like a physical blow. I hadn't just forgotten to call. I had completely forgotten that May 12th was your birthday at all. The date didn't even register when I saw it on the calendar." "That hurt more than you know," I said quietly, allowing my pain to be visible for once instead of hiding it to protect him. I can imagine. Or maybe I can't really. Because I've never had a child forget my existence. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine directly for the first time. After you hung up, I just stood there in the club, feeling sick to my stomach. Travis covered the bill, which was humiliating, but I barely even cared about that anymore. I kept thinking about all the birthdays you made special for me. The Batman cake when I was 7, even though money was tight that year. The surprise party for my 16th with all my basketball teammates. The care packages you sent to my dorm every year in college with homemade cookies and silly dollar store toys to make me laugh during finals. His voice thickened with emotion. You never forgot a single important moment in my life. Not one. Even when I was being impossible, especially when I was being impossible as a teenager. You still remembered everything that mattered to me. He ran a hand through his already disheveled hair. I left right after you hung up. Just told everyone I wasn't feeling well and went out to my car. And I sat there for hours, thinking about who I've become. When did I start seeing you as, I don't know, background? Like a permanent fixture that would always be there, requiring no maintenance or appreciation. That's exactly how it felt, Marcus, I said with quiet dignity. Like I was a convenience. ATM, cheerleader, emergency contact, but not a person with feelings. Not someone worthy of the bare minimum of consideration. Marcus flinched at my words, the truth of them landing like a physical blow. You're right. And there's no excuse. Not work, not my social life, not the divorce. Nothing justifies it. He met my eyes directly, his own damp with unshed tears. I am so sorry, Mom. For yesterday and for all the days before it when I treated you as less important than you are. Than you've always been. I studied him for a long moment, searching for sincerity. I'd heard apologies before, of course. Quick sorries, tossed out to smooth ruffled feathers. Temporary remorse that faded with time. But this felt different. The rawness in his voice, the shame in his eyes. These weren't performances. This was my son seeing himself clearly, perhaps for the first time in years. I believe you're sorry now, Marcus. But I've heard apologies before. Sorry I missed Sunday dinner. Work ran late. Sorry I forgot to call back. Got caught up with friends. Words are easy in the moment of regret. He nodded, accepting this hard truth without defense. I know. That's why I wanted to show you I'm serious about changing things. He reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the granite countertop to me. I opened it slowly, uncertain what to expect. Inside was a reservation confirmation, printed on heavy cardstock. Sandals Spa Retreat? For Memorial Day weekend. It's a mother-son spa weekend. 3 days, all-inclusive. I've already cleared my schedule, told Travis I'm unavailable, no exceptions. I thought we could spend some real time together.
No distractions, no phones.
Just reconnecting. I was genuinely surprised. You hate spas. You've always said massages are weird with strangers touching you. This wasn't just a gift, it was a sacrifice of comfort. A willingness to step into my world instead of expecting me to always accommodate his. I do, Marcus admitted with a sheepish smile that reminded me, just for a moment, of the boy he'd been. But you love them. This isn't about me, or what I want to do. It's about showing you that you matter, that I'm willing to prioritize your happiness. My eyes filled with tears, but I blinked them back. Not from overwhelming emotion, though that was present, but because I wanted to see him clearly. To stay present in this important moment rather than retreating into easy sentimentality. It's a lovely gesture, Marcus. Truly. It's just the start, Mom. I've also set up a monthly reminder in my calendar. Second Sunday of every month is reserved for you. Dinner, museum, movie, whatever you want. Non-negotiable, nothing gets scheduled over it. I finally reached for the gift bag on the counter, pulling out a leather-bound journal. Not a pre-packaged gift picked up at the last minute, but something chosen with thought. It's a gratitude journal. One for each of us, Marcus explained, pulling out an identical journal from his jacket pocket. I've started writing in mine. Every day, I'm going to write down something I'm grateful to you for. Some memory, some lesson you taught me, some sacrifice you made. I thought maybe we could share entries sometimes, if you're willing. I opened the journal to find the first page already filled with Marcus's handwriting, the script careful and deliberate, so different from his usual hasty scrawl. Day 1. I'm grateful to my mother for teaching me resilience. When I was 9 and didn't make the baseball team, I wanted to quit sports forever. Mom sat with me on the porch swing and said, "Disappointment is part of life. Sunshine boy. It's what you do next that defines you." She helped me practice all summer and I made the team the following year. It was the first time I understood that failure isn't final unless you let it be. You remember that? I asked, looking up with wet eyes, genuinely surprised. It had been such a small moment over 30 years ago. Just one of thousands of conversations we'd had over the years. I remember everything, Mom. His voice was soft, sincere. I just got distracted by less important things. By my own selfish priorities. The simplicity of this admission. Not an excuse, just a recognition. Touched me more deeply than an elaborate apology could have. I don't expect perfection, Marcus. I never have. I just want to matter in your life. To be more than an afterthought. You are. You always have been, even when I've done a terrible job of showing it. He paused, hesitant. Can I ask you something? About last night? Of course. What made you finally do it? Freeze the card, I mean. After years of, well, me not being the son I should have been. Why was yesterday the breaking point? I considered this carefully, wanting to be honest without being hurtful. It wasn't just about the birthday, though that was part of it. It was seeing that charge come through while I was sitting there with people who had made the effort to celebrate with me. People who aren't even family, but who treated me with more consideration than my own son had. It was the stark contrast between your actions and theirs that finally woke me up, I suppose. Made me realize I deserved better. Marcus nodded, absorbing this. You do deserve better. Much better. One more question. Yes. Are you still angry with me?
Was I?
I searched my feelings, taking the time to truly examine them rather than offering a reflexive reassurance. Not angry, no. Hurt still, yes. Cautious, definitely. Trust takes time to rebuild, Marcus. But I'm willing to try if you are. More than willing. Relief washed over his face, mingled with determination. And Dad, you mentioned Dad last night. About him being disappointed in me.
You're right.
He would be. He was always so intentional about showing appreciation, about marking special occasions. Your father never forgot a birthday, an anniversary, or a milestone in his life. Not because he had a perfect memory, but because he made the effort. He kept a calendar just for important dates. Would write them down years in advance, sometimes. I miss him, Marcus said softly. He would have known exactly what to say to me right now. Actually, I think he just did. Through you. Our eyes met in understanding, and for the first time since Marcus arrived, I reached across the counter and placed my hand over his. Not all was forgiven, not all was forgotten, but the first steps toward healing had been taken. Not with grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but with small truths acknowledged and real commitments made. Sometimes that's how broken things begin to mend. Not all at once, but piece by piece, with care and intention. That was 6 weeks ago. You might be wondering what's happened since then. Did Marcus keep his promises? Or was it just momentary remorse that faded once the crisis passed? Was the birthday revenge merely a dramatic moment that changed nothing, Or did it truly mark a turning point in our relationship? I'm happy to say that small act of freezing the credit card, that moment of finally saying enough, became a catalyst for real change. We did go on that spa weekend. Marcus was so awkward during his massage that the therapist finally gave up and just focused on his shoulders, admitting defeat in the face of his tense discomfort. It's like trying to massage a statue, Mrs. Gray, she told me later with a good-natured laugh. But he tried, and that meant everything. The retreat itself was beautiful, nestled in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains, with sweeping views that took your breath away. We hiked gentle trails in the mornings, pointing out wildflowers and interesting birds. We took a watercolor class together, both producing landscapes that will never hang in galleries, but made us laugh with their earnest imperfection. We talked, really talked, over long dinners on the terrace, watching the sun set behind the mountains in a blaze of pink and gold. One evening, sitting by a fire pit under a canopy of stars, Marcus told me things I'd never known. How scared he'd been when his father died, not just of losing James, but of failing me somehow. How the pressure of being an only child, the sole focus of my hopes and fears, had sometimes felt overwhelming. How his divorce from Kendra had shaken his confidence in a way he'd never fully admitted, even to himself. She said I was emotionally unavailable, he confessed, poking at the fire with his stick. That I was great at grand gestures, but terrible at daily kindness. I dismissed it as her being dramatic, but she was right. And I've been doing the same thing to you, haven't I? Showing up with big gifts when I remembered, but missing all the small moments that actually matter. I didn't contradict him, didn't rush to soothe his discomfort with denial. Sometimes, the most loving thing we can do is allow someone the dignity of their own difficult realizations. We've had 2 of our monthly Sunday get-togethers so far. The first one, Marcus took me to the art museum's new Impressionist exhibit. He's never cared much for art. James and I used to joke that our son wouldn't notice if we replaced the paintings in our house with circus posters, but he listened attentively as I explained why Monet's water lilies move me to tears. How the play of light and reflection creates a world that's both familiar and dreamlike. How the artist's failing eyesight in his later years added a poignant dimension to his work. Marcus asked questions, genuine ones. Not the perfunctory interest of someone waiting for their turn to speak, but the curiosity of someone trying to see through another's eyes. When we left the museum, he bought me a small print of my favorite painting, not as an apology or to earn points, but as a memento of a day well spent. The second Sunday, we cooked dinner together in my kitchen, his father's famous lasagna recipe, and looked through old photo albums for hours. Marcus was fascinated by pictures of me and James before he came into our lives. You guys were so young, he marveled, studying a photo of us on our honeymoon, standing on a beach in Maui. And Dad's hair. I never knew he had so much of it. We laughed until we cried at photos of Marcus's awkward adolescence, the regrettable haircuts, the braces, the unfortunate fashion choices of the early 2000s. Why did you let me leave the house looking like that? He demanded, pointing to a picture of himself in cargo shorts and a neon green shirt 3 sizes too large. You were very insistent it was the style, I reminded him. And if I remember correctly, you told me I was totally clueless about what's cool, Mom. The gratitude journals have been the most meaningful change, though. Every Sunday, we share what we've written that week. Sometimes it's profound. Marcus wrote about how watching me care for his father during his illness showed him what true love looks like. Sometimes it's simple. I wrote about being grateful for the way he still laughs with his whole body, just like he did as a little boy. The entries aren't always easy to write. Some days, I find myself staring at the blank page, still processing decades of complicated feelings. Some days, Marcus admits, he struggles to put his gratitude into words that feel adequate. But the practice itself, The intentional remembering, the deliberate acknowledgement, has begun to heal wounds I didn't even know I had. Has he slipped up occasionally? Of course. He missed a call last week when he promised to check in. But the difference is, he called the next morning without prompting, apologized sincerely, and made plans to make up for it. No excuses about being too busy or forgetting. Just ownership of his mistake and a genuine commitment to do better. The pattern has changed. The mindfulness is there. Not perfection, I don't expect that, and it would be exhausting for both of us, but progress. Real, meaningful progress. As for the credit card, I removed him from the account entirely. Not as punishment, but because it was time. He's a successful 42-year-old man who needs to stand on his own financial feet. He agreed completely, even offering to pay back the $750 from Lux. I declined. Some lessons are worth more than money. The story of my birthday revenge didn't stay between just Marcus and me. Catherine was there that night, saw me check my phone, saw my expression change. She cornered me a few days later, demanded to know what had happened. You did what? Froze his card right in the middle of his fancy night out? Aaliyah Gray, I didn't think you had it in you, she exclaimed, impressed and slightly scandalized. It wasn't my finest moment, maybe, but it felt necessary. Necessary? It was brilliant. About time, too. And now he's actually showing up, being present, making an effort. It's been different. Really different. Catherine studied me over the rim of her coffee cup, eyes narrowed in that way she has when she's trying to solve a puzzle. You look different, too. More, I don't know, present. Like you've come back to yourself somehow. I hadn't thought about it that way, but she was right. I felt more fully myself than I had in years. Less like James's widow or Marcus's mother, and more like Aaliyah. The woman who once dreamed of seeing the world, who used to paint watercolors on Sunday afternoons, who loved thunderstorms and poetry and the smell of books. Somehow, in standing up for myself, I'd reclaimed pieces of my identity that had been slowly eroding away. My friend Virginia was equally delighted when I told her about the frozen credit card. So let me get this straight. He forgot your birthday, used your credit card for champagne, and you shut it down in real time? Oh, I wish I could have seen his face. It wasn't about humiliating him, Jenny. I protested, though part of me, a small, human part, had indeed found some satisfaction in imagining his shock when the card was declined. No, of course not. It was about respect. She became serious, setting down her teacup with a decisive click. Actually, I've been thinking about what you told me, about my situation with Diane. Virginia's daughter Diane had been taking advantage of her financially for years. Borrowing money without repaying it, living in Virginia's guest house rent-free while barely acknowledging her mother's existence. It was a painful subject, one Virginia usually avoided discussing. I changed the Wi-Fi password yesterday, told her she could have the new one when we sat down to discuss a reasonable rent contribution. She looked both nervous and proud. She was furious, but we're having dinner tonight to talk about it. Good for you, Ginny. It's not easy, but it's necessary. That's what you showed me, Aaliyah. That it's never too late to change the dynamic. That sometimes a small action, a frozen card, a changed password, can be the beginning of something better. Even my neighbor, Henry, found inspiration in my story. Margie told me what you did with that son of yours, he said one afternoon as we both worked in our front gardens, separated by a low hedge. Got me thinking about my Tommy. He only calls when he needs something fixed on his house or money for the grandkids' school stuff. Never just to check on his old man. And I prompted when he fell silent. Henry grinned mischievously, suddenly looking 20 years younger. I didn't answer the phone last week when he called about fixing his garbage disposal. Called him back 2 days later, said I was busy with my new senior center friends. You should have heard him. Suddenly very concerned about what I'm up to, whether I need anything. We shared a knowing laugh, co-conspirators in the gentle revolution of parents reclaiming their dignity. It was strange, realizing that my small act of standing up for myself had created ripples beyond my own relationship with Marcus. Friends who'd witnessed my story were finding their own courage, their own ways to reset relationships that had become unbalanced. Each of them adapting the Aaliyah method, as Catherine had jokingly dubbed it, to their own situations. This wasn't what I expected when I shared my experience. I wasn't trying to start a senior citizen rebellion. But there's something powerful, it seems, in watching someone else draw a line and seeing the positive changes that can come from it. Something contagious about dignity reclaimed and boundaries established. Looking back over my 65 years, I've learned a few things about relationships that I think are worth sharing. Especially for those of you who might be struggling with similar situations, being taken for granted by people you love. First, people will treat you how you allow them to treat you. For years, I allowed Marcus to prioritize everything and everyone above me. I made excuses for him, smoothed things over, pretended it didn't hurt. I answered every request for money, every last-minute plea for help, every demand on my time and energy. In doing so, I taught him that this behavior was acceptable, that I would always be there, no matter how little effort he made. We teach people how to treat us through what we accept, what we forgive without comment, what we overlook time and again. It's a hard truth, one that requires us to examine our own role in dysfunctional dynamics. Not to blame ourselves for others' poor behavior, but to recognize our power to change the pattern. Second, real love includes both compassion and accountability. For too long, I thought being a good mother meant unconditional support without expectations. I was wrong. True love, the kind that helps people grow, includes holding them accountable when they fall short. James understood this better than I did. He adored Marcus, but he never hesitated to call him out when necessary. I remember Marcus at 16, coming home well past curfew, offering a flimsy excuse about losing track of time. I was ready to accept it, relieved he was home safe, reluctant to create conflict. But James wasn't having it. "That's not good enough, son," he said, voice firm but not unkind. "You have a phone. You had plenty of opportunities to call. You chose not to because you knew we'd tell you to come home. That's not losing track of time. That's deliberately breaking the rules we've established." Marcus was grounded for 2 weeks. He was furious, of course. But later, much later, he told me that he respected his father more for standing firm. Dad always meant what he said, he reflected. I knew exactly where I stood with him. It made me feel secure, even when I was mad about it. After James died, I lost sight of this balance. Grief made me softer, more accommodating. I wanted to spare Marcus additional pain, so I stopped holding him accountable. A mistake made with love, but a mistake nonetheless. Third, it's never too late to change a dynamic. Never. I worried for years that if I pushed back, if I expressed my hurt and disappointment, I might damage my relationship with my son irreparably. The truth was, the relationship was already damaged. It just wasn't obvious to him, because I was bearing all the pain of it. I told myself it was too late, that patterns established over decades couldn't be changed. That Marcus was too set in his ways, that I was too old to start enforcing boundaries I'd never clearly established before. I was wrong. One moment of clarity, one frozen credit card on one forgotten birthday, changed everything. Not instantly, not without effort from both of us, but fundamentally. If I'd known how transformative it would be, I might have found my courage years ago. And finally, perhaps most importantly, your worth isn't determined by how others treat you, but you teach people how to value you by how you value yourself. When I froze that credit card, I wasn't just sending a message to Marcus. I was sending one to myself. That I mattered. That my feelings were valid. That at 65 years old, I deserved respect and consideration, not just whatever scraps of attention someone chose to throw my way when convenient. That single act of self-respect did more to heal my relationship with my son than years of silent suffering, of swallowing hurt to keep the peace, of making myself smaller and my needs less important to accommodate his indifference. Something Marcus said during one of our Sunday visits has stayed with me. We were talking about that night about the card being declined, and he said, "You know, Mom, in a weird way, that was the best thing you could have done for me. It was like a wake-up call I didn't know I needed. Not just about how I was treating you, but about who I was becoming as a person." That's the thing about boundaries, about standing up for yourself. They don't just protect you. They can actually be a gift to the other person, an opportunity for them to see themselves clearly, perhaps for the first time. When we let people treat us poorly without consequence, we're not doing them any favors. We're participating in their moral decline, their slow drift away from their better selves. We're denying them the chance to rise to our expectations, to be the people they're capable of being. So, was I wrong to freeze that card in the middle of his big night out? Was it petty? Vindictive? Maybe a little. I'm only human, after all. But sometimes, it takes a dramatic moment to break through years of established patterns. Sometimes, it takes a consequence that can't be ignored to create real change. I'm not suggesting that everyone should deploy what my sister now jokingly calls the Aaliyah method of family intervention. Every relationship is different. Every context requires its own approach. But I will say this: setting boundaries isn't selfish. Expecting basic consideration isn't asking too much. And it's never too late to reset a relationship that's veered off course. One evening, 6 months after my birthday, I visited James's grave with fresh flowers. I sat on the small bench beside his headstone, arranging the lilies the way he liked them. It was a perfect autumn day, the kind he used to call God showing off. Crisp air, brilliant blue sky, leaves turning gold and crimson on the trees that dotted the cemetery. "You would be proud of him, James," I said softly. "He's trying. Really trying. And you'd be proud of me too, I think, for finally finding my voice." A gentle breeze stirred the flowers, and for just a moment, I could almost feel James's presence, that solid, comforting energy that had been the foundation of my life for so long. Not a ghost, nothing so dramatic, just the enduring impact of a good man whose influence continued long after he was gone. On my way back to the car, my phone buzzed with a text. It was for Marcus. "Just confirming Sunday brunch. I'm making Dad's famous waffles. They won't be as good as yours, but I'm practicing. Love you, Mom." I smiled, typing back. "Looking forward to it. And your dad's waffles were actually terrible. I just never told him. But don't worry, I'll teach you my secret recipe. Love you too." As I drove home, I thought about how birthdays aren't really about the cake or the presents. They're about feeling seen, feeling valued, feeling remembered. For years, I'd convinced myself that these things weren't important, that asking for them was somehow selfish or needy, that I should be grateful for whatever scraps of attention came my way, rather than expecting, deserving, the full feast of consideration. But that 65th birthday, the one that started with disappointment and ended with a frozen credit card, taught me that expecting basic consideration isn't asking too much. It's the foundation of any healthy relationship. And sometimes, the key to receiving that consideration is simply believing that you deserve it. That night, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset, I thought about all the women my age who've spent their lives making excuses for the people who take them for granted, who've convinced themselves that unconditional love means accepting mistreatment without complaint, who've forgotten that they deserve to be treated with the same consideration they show others. I wanted to tell them all what I'd finally learned at 65. It's never too late to teach someone how to treat you. It's never too late to draw a line in the sand. It's never too late for a little birthday revenge, the kind that changes everything. Because sometimes the best gift you can give yourself is the courage to say enough. And sometimes the best gift you can give someone else is the chance to be better than they've been. That's what I gave Marcus when I froze that card. Not a punishment, but an opportunity. And in his own way, that's what he gave me with his genuine remorse and commitment to change, not just apologies, but a path forward. So here we are, planning for my next birthday. Marcus has already reserved the private room at Bellini's, and this time, I know the chair beside me won't be empty. Like the sign in my kitchen says, the one James bought me for our 25th anniversary. The best is yet to come. For the first time in years, I believe it. And all it took was one frozen credit card, one mortifying moment in an exclusive nightclub, and one mother who finally decided that her birthday deserved more than an afterthought. Birthday revenge. Sometimes it's exactly what a relationship needs. Has someone in your life been taking you for granted? Have you ever set a boundary that changed everything? Share your story in the comments below. And if you found Aaliyah's journey inspiring, please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss another story about standing up for yourself with dignity and grace. Remember, it's never too late to teach someone how to treat you. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no. Tag someone who needs to hear this message today.